Hello everyone, welcome back to the Scrap and Stamp YouTube channel. It's Jess here, and today I'm excited to show you 3 easy embossing techniques. Here's a little peek at the finished product. I'm going to show you how to use embossing powder on your background without a heat gun, how to create your very own glossy ephemera piece with a simple die cut, and of course a classic sentiment strip. For today's project, I'm using Fawn's giant Happy Spring, rainy backdrop, and Avery's Rain or Shine stamp set. And of course, an assortment of wow embossing powders. Let's get started. For our background, you're going to need a piece of double-sided foam at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 and a rainy backdrop with white cardstock. I'm going to remove the release paper and adhere the rainy backdrop into place, leaving the raindrops sticky and ready for embossing powder. And now we're ready to pour embossing powder all over the card front. Before I make a mess, I'm going to grab a piece of copy paper to protect my work surface and so that we can save as much embossing powder as possible. And now I'm going to carefully pour the embossing powder onto the card front. If glitter isn't your thing, you can totally skip this step and use a silver piece of cardstock, but I wanted to get a little messy and use my embossing powders in a different way. After I cleaned up all the excess powders, I'm going to carefully press down with my fingers so everything sticks in place. So far, I'm loving it. Now we can work on creating our very own glossy ephemera piece using Happy Spring. So I went ahead and started by die cutting Happy Spring once in white cardstock. For this technique, I found it handy to have coffee filters for each of the embossing powders. I'm going to pick up the sentiment with my craft tweezers so that I can protect my hands and not burn myself. And then I'm going to start by applying the blue embossing powder to the bottom of the sentiment. And then I'm going to add pink embossing powder to the center. And I'm not worried about perfection at this point. We're going to go back and forth between the layers so that we get a nice even surface. And finally, purple embossing powder to the top of the sentiment. And now for my favorite part, melting the powder. While I'm applying the heat, I make sure to move around my embossing tool so that I don't burn the paper or the embossing powder. Once the embossing powder is fully melted, or I think that we're finished, I like to tilt my sentiment in the light just to make sure I didn't miss any spots. With the first layer melted, now we can go ahead and add more Versamark ink to the surface, and then we can add more layers of embossing powder in each of the colors, and we can keep going until we're happy with the result. With our sentiment all embossed and perfectly glossy, for dimension, I'm going to go ahead and layer it up with 2 other pieces of the Happy Spring in white cardstock. And now we're all set with our giant sentiment and background. We can start working on the third way that I like to use embossing powder, and that is by creating sentiment strips. So I'm going to grab a piece of light gray cardstock and treat it with my anti-static powder tool. And I'm going to stamp Just a Note to Brighten Up Your Day from the Rain or Shine Avery Elle stamp set. With my sentiment all stamped, I'm going to add pink embossing powder and gently tap away any excess powder. If that doesn't do the trick and remove all the excess powder, I like to have a fine paintbrush handy, or I even use my craft pick to kind of take away any pieces that are not in the right place. And then I'm going to reach for my heat tool, melt the embossing powder, and then trim the sentiment down with my paper trimmer. And now all that's left is assembling the card. I'm going to go ahead and adhere the Happy Spring to the center of the card, and then I'm going to place the sentiment strip in the center of our sentiment. And now we can add in our Avery Elle cuties. I made sure to stamp them with Memento Tuxedo black ink on ultra smooth alcohol marker friendly paper and colored them in with my tri-blend markers. To finish off the card, I added 3D foam tape to our bunny and frog, glossy accents to the cutest umbrella and rain boots ever, and of course, no card is complete without coordinating sequins. And here's our card. I hope you learned something new today and feel inspired to create. If you like this video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Until next time.